We were finally celebrating our promotion and a fresh start until my mother-in-law arrived with an ultimatum that turned our smart home into a high-tech death trap. We thought we were just fighting for our marriage, but we were actually fighting to survive a house that had been programmed to kill us. The champagne bottle in my hand felt heavy, but not nearly as heavy as the silence that had suffocated our household for the last 3 years. When my husband, Mark, walked through the door, his eyes were bright with a kind of ambition I hadn't seen since our wedding day. He had been promoted to senior director. It was the windfall we had prayed for, the key to finally moving out of this suffocating suburban sprawl and away from the woman who lived 3 doors down, my mother-in-law, Elena. Elena didn't just live 3 doors down. She lived inside our marriage. She had a key, a sense of entitlement that bordered on the pathological, and a deep-seated resentment toward me that had only intensified as Mark's career climbed. She viewed my existence as a parasitic drain on her son's resources. The night of the promotion, she showed up uninvited, her face etched with a look of practiced martyrdom. "So," she hissed, eyeing the half-empty bottle of Moet on the counter, "you're celebrating while your own family struggles? You know my pension barely covers my medication, Mark. And now you're rolling in money, yet you leave your mother to scavenge?" I tried to keep my tone light, my smile practiced. "Elena, we've sent you money every month. You have a full pantry. What is this really about?" She ignored me entirely, locking eyes with Mark. "It's her. She's the anchor dragging you down. A wife who doesn't respect your mother doesn't respect her husband. You deserve someone who understands your lineage, someone who knows their place. If you don't divorce this woman by the end of the week, I will disown you. I will cut you from my will, and I will make sure the family knows exactly what kind of ungrateful wretch you've married." The air in the room turned frigid. Mark looked torn, his face pale, but I didn't blink. I walked to the mahogany desk in the study and pulled out the manila envelope I had been keeping hidden for months. Documents I had drafted with a lawyer the day she had tried to get me fired from my own job. I didn't see the point in fighting a fire with a cup of water. It was better to let the house burn and move to a different zip code. I slid the papers across the table. My smile was wide, genuine, and utterly terrifying. "Fine, Elena. You want a divorce? You've got one. Not from Mark, but from us. From your access to our accounts, our home, and our lives. I've drafted a full severance of ties. I'm signing my half right now." Elena sneered, grabbing a pen with a shaking hand. "You think you're in control? You're nothing without our name. You'll be begging for scraps by Monday." I watched as she scribbled her signature with a flourish of spite. The moment the ink hit the paper, a strange electric calm washed over me. I had cut the cord. I was finally free. But as I leaned forward to collect the documents, Elena's phone began to chime, a relentless, rapid-fire sequence of notifications that made her look down. Her face drained of all color, and for the first time in years, the cruel glint in her eyes was replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. She dropped the phone as if it had turned into a live snake, and the screen shattered, but not before a single, chilling text message from an unknown number flashed across the cracked glass. I reached down to pick it up, curious about what could possibly break the woman who had spent years trying to break me, but Elena lunged across the table, her hands clawing at my wrists with a desperation I had never seen before. She didn't want the divorce anymore. She wanted to bury the phone. And as she scrambled, I caught a glimpse of the message before the screen went black. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the promotion. It was a photo of the very desk we were standing at, taken from inside our bedroom, with a timestamp from 3 minutes ago. The image on the screen wasn't just a photo. It was a digital death warrant. It was a clear, high-resolution shot of our private safe, the one hidden behind the velvet wallpaper in the master bedroom. It was wide open. Its contents, our passports, the deeds to the house, and the encrypted hard drives containing Mark's company secrets, were gone. The timestamp confirmed it. Someone had been in our room while we were standing here, bickering over Elena's petty grievances. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at Mark, who was still staring at the divorce papers as if they were the only reality that mattered. "Mark," I whispered, my voice trembling, "someone is in the house. Right now." Elena wasn't laughing anymore. The bravado that had fueled her demands for divorce evaporated, replaced by a frantic, sweating panic. She scrambled backward, clutching her throat, her eyes darting toward the darkened hallway. "You don't understand," she wheezed, her voice high and brittle. "They said if I got you to sign, if I got the signatures, they would stop. They said it was just a formality." I grabbed her shoulders, shaking her with a violence that shocked even me. Who? Who is they, Elena? What did you sell to save your own skin?" Before she could answer, the lights in the kitchen flickered and died. A deep, mechanical hum echoed through the walls, a security system override. The smart locks on the front and back doors clicked into place with a definitive, heavy thud. We were locked in. The house, which had been our fortress, had just become our cage. Then the living room television crackled to life. There was no cable signal, only a static-filled feed that cleared into a grainy, black-and-white image of our own kitchen, viewed from a perspective I couldn't identify. I looked around, searching for a hidden camera, my skin crawling. A distorted, synthesized voice began to emanate from the speakers, slow and deliberate. "Congratulations on the promotion, Mark," the voice rasped, the tone dripping with digital malice. "And congratulations to you both on the dissolution of your assets. It makes our job so much cleaner. We've been waiting for this exact moment, the moment the legal ties were severed, to collect on the debt your mother accrued." Mark stepped toward the television, his fists clenched. "What debt? My mother has no authority to make deals for me." The voice chuckled, a hollow, metallic sound. "She didn't need authority. She only needed proximity. She's been feeding us information for months, thinking she was just ruining your marriage. She didn't realize she was handing over the keys to the kingdom." A heavy thud sounded from the basement door, followed by the slow, rhythmic sound of heavy boots walking across the floorboards upstairs. Someone was pacing directly above our heads, methodical and heavy. Elena collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching the signed divorce papers to her chest. "They're not coming for the money," she whimpered, her face twisted in a mask of realization. "They're coming for the witnesses." The footsteps above us stopped abruptly, right over the study. A floorboard creaked, and then a fine metallic dust began to filter down through the ceiling cracks, shimmering in the dim light of the TV. My phone buzzed in my hand. It wasn't a call. It was a live video feed, and as I tapped it, my breath hitched in my throat. It was a camera inside our ventilation system, looking down at us from the ceiling, and behind the lens, I could see the reflection of a masked figure slowly unscrewing the grate, a suppressed handgun glinting in the dark. I didn't scream. The terror was too sharp, too cold for something as useless as a scream. I grabbed Mark's arm, my nails digging into his suit jacket, and pulled him toward the hallway just as the ventilation grate above us clattered to the floor with a deafening metallic ring. A muffled thwip echoed, a silent shot that shredded the expensive leather armchair where I had been sitting seconds before. "Run!" I hissed, my voice barely a tremor. We didn't head for the front door. The smart lock override meant we were sealed in like specimens in a jar. Instead, I shoved Mark toward the utility closet, the only place in the house without a clear line of sight from the vents. We slammed the door shut, the space smelling of dust and pine cleaner, and huddled in the pitch-black silence. My heart was a frantic drumbeat in my ears, drowning out the slow, deliberate creak of boots on the hardwood floors outside. "Elena," Mark whispered, his voice cracking. "She's still out there. We have to go back for her." "She brought this down on us, Mark," I hissed back, my eyes wide in the dark. "She didn't just sell information. She sold us. If we go back out there, we're dead." Outside the closet, the heavy footsteps stopped right in front of our hiding place. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I gripped a heavy metal flashlight, the only thing I'd managed to grab, and held my breath, praying that the intruder wouldn't notice the faint sliver of light beneath the door. Then the voice returned. Not from the television this time, but from the other side of the closet door, soft, intimate, and chillingly close. "I can hear your heart rates, you know," the man whispered. It wasn't distorted anymore. It was cold, precise, and sounded unnervingly like a neighbor we hadn't seen in weeks. The smart home sensors are quite sensitive. They track thermal signatures, movement, even respiration. You're playing a game of tag in a house that's actively trying to kill you. A high-pitched tone began to whine through the floorboards, the sound of the gas furnace igniting. The temperature in the small closet spiked instantly, a wave of sweltering heat pushing against my skin. "The house is set to reach 400 degrees in 10 minutes, the man continued, his voice vibrating through the wood of the door. "But don't worry. The locks will release automatically once the interior sensors detect a complete loss of life. It's a very efficient system, isn't it? Your mother spent a fortune on these security upgrades last year, Mark. She just didn't tell you who paid the installation fee." I looked at Mark, his face ghostly pale, and realized with a jolt of horror that he was staring at his own phone. It wasn't showing a map or a call. It was showing a live bank transfer, an automated withdrawal of every cent of his hard-earned savings, clearing into an offshore account in real time. "He's draining everything," Mark whispered, his voice dead. Suddenly, the knob of the closet door began to slowly turn, the metal protesting as it resisted the heat expanding within the frame. I gripped the flashlight with both hands, ready to swing at whatever shadow stepped through. But as the door creaked open, it wasn't the gunman who stood there. It was Elena, her face an unreadable mask of iron, holding a small, silver remote control in her trembling hand. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked at us, then at the hallway behind her, and her thumb hovered over a red button. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her eyes devoid of any maternal warmth. But they have my grandson, Mark, and they told me the only way he leaves this building alive is if I lock you in the blast chamber and turn the key. Before I could process the words, a shadow stepped out from behind her, a tall, faceless figure in black tactical gear, and he raised a silenced pistol, not at us, but at Elena's head. The air grew thin, scorching my lungs with every ragged breath. Elena's eyes went wide, the remote slipping from her fingers as the masked figure stepped into the light, his gloved finger tightening on the trigger. Time seemed to fracture, splitting into 1,000 jagged pieces. "Drop it," the gunman commanded, his voice devoid of humanity. Elena didn't look at him. She looked at Mark, really looked at him, with a sudden, agonizing clarity that seemed to shatter the years of resentment. She reached out, not for her own safety, but to shove the remote toward me. "Run!" she shrieked, her voice tearing through the heat of the closet. "The basement! The ventilation shaft leads to the crawl space. Go!" The suppressed thwip was followed by the sickening thud of Elena collapsing to the floor. The gunman stepped over her, his eyes cold slits behind a tactical visor. But he had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated the very home automation system he was manipulating. As he lunged forward to reach for me, I slammed the remote into the wall-mounted interface I had secretly bypassed hours ago. I didn't press unlock. I pressed override, purge. The entire house groaned as the smart system initiated a safety protocol intended for fire suppression. The overhead sprinklers didn't just drip, they erupted with high-pressure, oxygen-depleting foam, flooding the hallway in a thick white chemical sludge. The gunman staggered, his vision obscured, his tactical goggles instantly smeared with the opaque, suffocating foam. I grabbed Mark's arm, pulling him through the confusion, tripping over Elena's prone form. "Not now!" I screamed as Mark tried to stop, his hand reaching for his mother. "We have to move!" We scrambled into the dark, narrow service duct behind the pantry. It was a tight, metal-lined tunnel, vibrating with the sound of the house's internal fans screaming as they tried to vent the foam. We crawled through the grime, my fingernails tearing on the jagged steel seams, until we hit the heavy iron grate leading to the backyard. The emergency exit Elena had whispered about during a heated argument months ago. I kicked the grate outward, tumbling onto the wet grass of our backyard. The cool night air hit me like a splash of ice water, stinging my overheated skin. Mark spilled out behind me, panting, his clothes covered in white chemical residue. We didn't stop. We sprinted across the lawn toward the tree line, not daring to look back at the house that was currently being engulfed by its own suffocating security protocols. We didn't stop until we reached the main road, where the sirens of the police, alerted by the silent alarm I'd triggered before the Wi-Fi went down, were finally wailing in the distance. The aftermath was a blur of flashing blue lights and federal agents. By morning, the house was a crime scene, a shell of its former self. Elena had survived, a miracle of tactical armor she hadn't known she was wearing. The gunman had panicked and fled when the chemical deluge rendered the house a tactical nightmare. We sat in the back of an ambulance, blankets draped over our shivering shoulders. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from the bank. The transfer had been reversed. The encryption keys were recovered. The debts Elena had been forced to pay were exposed as part of a massive, long-con extortion ring targeting high-level corporate directors. Mark looked at me, his face hollowed by the ordeal. the ambition of the previous day replaced by the raw reality of survival.
"We lost everything, didn't we?" he whispered, gesturing toward the wreckage of our life. I looked at the charred ruins of the home where I had been a prisoner, then at Elena, who was being loaded into a different ambulance, her eyes meeting mine with a terrifying, silent plea for forgiveness. I took a long, steadying breath, the first one that felt truly mine in years. "No," I said, reaching out to hold his hand, my grip firm and unbreakable. "We didn't lose everything. We just finished the final chapter of the story they wrote for us. Now, we start writing our own." I closed my eyes, listening to the morning birds beginning to sing, knowing that whatever happened next, the walls would finally be ours, and for the first time, there were no secrets hidden behind the wallpaper.